1998. Dr. Dre's Aftermath Entertainment signs then unknown rapper Eminem. Zinedine Zidane scores twice as France won their first World Cup, beating Brazil 3-0. And Rush Hour, directed by Brett Ratner, starring Jackie Chan and Chris Tucker, is released, which is Jackie Chan's Hollywood breakthrough. A breakthrough for one actor, but in terms of Thomas and Friends, the breakthrough had already begun and was entering its season 5 boom period, with this season being released in the UK on the 14th of September 1998 and the 6th of September 1999 in the US. This is the story of Thomas and Friends, season 5. Thomas and Friends was now a worldwide sensation. The show being dubbed over in many countries now, merchandise flying off the shelves, and its popularity at an all-time high. So much so that Britt Allcroft began talks about a movie which would soon become Thomas and the Magic Railroad in the year 2000. In order to get this movie out there to investors and show them what they could really do, David Mitton was encouraged to go big or go home with this season. He had to refine his model-making skills to accommodate high-budget presentations, specifically looking at the action and the atmosphere. With Wilbur Awdry sadly passing away in 1997, it meant that the show was free of the previous restrictions that it once had to rely on Railway series canon, with a lot of the episodes being written, produced and directed by Britt Allcroft and David Mitton themselves. Although they made the very smart decision to still hire a railway consultant, David Maidment, of the Railway Children's Charity. Maidment had met with Stephen Wright, relaying stories to him about his experiences working on railways in South Wales and Crewe. Maidment then received a call asking if they could use some of the stories as reference material for episodes, as a lot of the Awdry stories were based on true events, and they wanted to keep this theme going into season 5. Maidment would then receive writing credits alongside Britt Allcroft and David Mitton, and he received a cheque for £10,000, which he donated to his Railway Children's Charity. The 5th series also boasted numerous darker plot lines, including much more intense action sequences, and of course, the crashes. For ease of filming, the 5th series introduced larger scale models of the narrow gauge engines, as they were notoriously difficult to work with in season 4. They were built to an even larger scale than the standard gauge engines, which meant 9 human figures also had to be built to accommodate 8 engine crew members and a workman. The smaller scale engines were still used in this season, especially when they were interacting in scenes with the standard gauge engines. In terms of the voice acting talent, Michael Angeles stayed on, as he would do, for a very long time. But in the US, another change was in progress. Shining Time Station was cancelled, and when it was cancelled, George Carlin left the franchise as well. But Thomas and Friends by this point was able to stand on its own 2 feet, so it didn't need Shining Time Station to ferry it to American audiences. But a new voice actor was needed. They'd already secured celebrity voice talent in Ringo Starr and George Carlin, so could they carry on this trend? Not only did they carry on the trend, they knocked it out the park with one of their biggest celebrity signings, Alec Baldwin. Alec Baldwin was certainly the example of a star that shines bright, and he brought that energy into season 5 of Thomas and Friends, with a lot of American audiences saying that Baldwin's narration is their best narrations. I may do a video on that someday, about my own preferred narrators, but you can't deny when you listen to Alec Baldwin in Thomas and Friends season 5, there is a charm and a magnetism that just radiates from him. He turns every episode into a feature film with how he narrates the show, the voices that he does for the characters, while a bit OTT cartoonish, certainly give those characters personality. And with Alec Baldwin coming on board as the narrator, it was no surprise that based on his performance here, he went on to be Mr. Conductor in Thomas and the Magic Railroad. Let's talk about the characters that were introduced this season. There were quite a few characters that were introduced in this season. The standout character going forward in the show was of course Cranky the Crane. But aside from Cranky, There were a lot of characters that were really only used for this season, or would have very fleeting appearances afterwards. Such characters include Butch the Breakdown Crane, the Horrid Lorries, Derek the Diesel Engine, Ari and Bert, although they would also become prominent figures going forward, Bertram, Old Slow Coach, Tiger Moth, Thumper, and we don't know if it's sentient or not, Boulder. This season also felt like they went back to focusing on a lot of the main cast, essentially the Steam team of engines 1 to 7. Secondary characters did get lead roles in episodes such as George the Steamroller, Toad the Brake Van, Bill and Ben, but this is when a lot of the larger cast started to be thinned out. For example, this is the last time that we see Boko in the series. Duck and Edward's roles are significantly reduced, and the Scottish twin engines, Donald and Douglas, have no episodes. There is a fleeting glance in one episode, and that's about it. Now, I've kept these deliberately short because I want to really talk about my thoughts on Season 5, because this one has a little bit more complicated history with me. In 1998, I was starting to get weaned away from Thomas and Friends, part of the societal pressure phase that I talk about in my Journey with Thomas and Friends video. And with Thomas and Friends being not as readily available in the UK on terrestrial TV, it made it harder for me to watch it. So I didn't see Thomas and Friends Season 5 until I was in my early 20s, as I was starting to fall in love with the series once again. I bought all of the classic series on DVD, Seasons 1 to 7, and then I got to Season 5, and I could not believe what I was seeing. And at first, not in a good way. Compare Season 5 to Seasons 1 to 4, and it is such a dramatic shift between these seasons. We had Seasons 1 to 4 where, yes, there were some high intensity moments, but overall, the show was very slice of life, comfortable, and played to its strengths of the time, and also relied a lot on the Railway series books as inspiration. With this season being the season that was going to be used to potentially get a film deal, they did go all out with it. A lot of action for action's sake, a lot of crashes for crashes' sake, a lot of out there situations that never were in the first 4 seasons that could be quite jarring for someone going from seasons 4 to 5. And especially myself, as I had such a long gap between watching season 4 as a kid to watching season 5 as an adult. It really did put me off. There was a lot of experimentation with tone in the episodes, and that was also very jarring for me. Because one minute you'd be watching a high intense action episode, and then you'd be cutting to a very mellow slice of life episode. And with the series now becoming more episodic, rather than having a continuing storyline throughout, that was also quite jarring for me. I was used to having a kind of beginning, middle, and end when it came to the Thomas and Friends seasons. It's probably one of the reasons why season 3 wasn't the highest rated for me as a kid. There was no through line for me. There was no consistency. And I loved consistency. Season 5 went back to that season 3-esque model, but with a lot more explosions and scary scenes. But, like I had said with season 4, I think with season 5 you have to grow up a bit before you really start to appreciate what they were trying to do with this season. Much like with the Railway series books, they were growing up with their audience. They were maturing as people, gaining experience as creatives, and were wanting to push the envelope, similar to what Tugs did when it went into production in 1988. That's why I do feel there's quite a symmetry between season 5 of Thomas and Friends and season 1 of Tugs. 10 years since they attempted their Go Big or Go Home project, David Mitton has a second bite at the cherry, where Brett Allcroft basically tells him, we've got a movie deal riding on this, you can go as bonkers as you want and make it cinematic. Mitton probably thought, finally, a second chance at Tugs, but in Thomas. And you can tell a lot of work went into trying to make this a cinematic masterclass, because in 2023, a lot of deleted scenes and bloopers were released from season 5. And it's something as a Thomas fan and as a creative that you really should go and check out, because there was so much work done on this season. And the amount of outtakes and the amount of shoots and reshoots that they had to do on big scenes, such as Gordon crashing through the station wall, You knew that they wanted to make this product as strong as possible. When I did my top 5 best and top 5 worst episodes of Thomas and Friends Season 5, I won't lie, I was probably still in that little bubble of, it wasn't the Thomas that I liked, ergo, I don't like it. But it's another reason why I'm doing the ranking videos now that I've grown up a little bit, to prove that opinions can change over time. That with more knowledge, more insight, and more understanding of the craft that they were trying to do in Season 5, you can feel a bit more empathy for the crew and a greater knowledge and respect for what they achieved in this season. I have said previously, Season 5 will never be my top season. That's just it. I didn't have the nostalgia goggles on from when it first came out or watching it as a kid, so it doesn't rank as highly for me. But it doesn't mean that I don't appreciate everything that they tried to do in this season. So let's jump into my ranking video for Thomas and Friends Season 5. These are all my own personal opinions, and with this season in particular, your list will definitely be different than mine. It is the one thing that makes the Thomas fandom so unique. Let me know in the comments how you would rank Season 5, and with this video in particular, please keep the comments respectful, or I will disable them. But above all, enjoy the video. Okay, let's dive in. Number 26, Lady Hat's birthday party. The Fat Controller runs into a series of problems, like his car getting a flat tyre, Caroline being broken down, and falls from George into a muddy ditch, which ruins his suit on his way to his wife Lady Hat's birthday party. I'm sorry everybody, I don't like this episode. It doesn't mean that I don't appreciate the episode. It's two very different things, not liking something and not appreciating it. When you appreciate an episode, you understand what they were trying to do, you admire the execution of it, and that is a well-presented episode. But not liking it is a personal choice. From a personal choice, I don't like this episode, but I appreciate everything that it done. I mentioned in my worst episodes list that I thought this was the catalyst for Sir Topham Hatt becoming the bumbling idiot Fat Controller that we got in the tail end of the Brenner era and Blubber. I stand by that to an extent. I don't think people from those eras would have looked back to the classic era and thought, this shows the Fat Controller as a dumbass, let's put that into this season going forward and all of the rest of them. That's not what I'm saying. I just feel like you can see traces of what Sir Topham Hatt would become in those eras in this episode. Because you see this once proud authority figure, the one that has the respect of all the engines, the person that controls their life or death on the railway, become a whiny whip. That may sound extreme, but that's how I felt watching it. I was watching someone that I really admired and respected literally sink before my eyes. That's how I felt then. It's still a little bit how I feel now. Like, I still believe that we didn't need him to go through all of these trials to find out at the end that he is a loving family man, because we already knew that in previous seasons. You've seen him with trips out with his wife and his grandchildren. You know that he is caring. You know that he is not a bad guy because of how much he loves his engines. So we didn't need this calamity of errors to prove that Sir Topham Hatt was humanised. We already have it if you look at the previous seasons close enough. You know that Sir Topham Hatt is a kind man who loves his family and also loves his engines. That's all I needed to know. I don't care about human stories in this series. I'm here for the engines. As a kid, I hated people because they bullied me on a regular basis. They told me I was weird. They told me I wasn't special. They told me I was useless. They told me I wasn't good enough. So why would I want to see all of these examples being shown to me on screen? I wanted the engines because the engines were an escape. Don't get me wrong, I'm not a big fan of people now, but I appreciate the story for what it is. I appreciate what they were trying to do. I appreciate how they executed it. I love the direction. I love the score. But all of these things are ingrained into classic era Thomas at this point in time. We know we are going to get a cinematic masterclass. We know we are going to get music that is sent down to us from above. So the story itself kind of fell flat. And I really, really, really don't like Lady Hat. She is such a pompous ass in this. She starts off by basically demanding that Topham look his best, don't be late, because it's a very important day for me. She's essentially Mary Jane Spider-Man 3ing this guy. And then, after all the hell that he's went through, manages to turn up, and she's just like, I didn't think it would be fancy dress. I know we see the nice cuddle and then the party begins. I really hope he gave her a rollicking after her big day and told her all the crap that he went through just to get there on time. But something that I did actually notice on my rewatch that I thought was quite interesting. This is a special birthday party. And like we would all do, if it's a big party or a big night out, we get dolled up. So in Lady Hat's birthday party, we see her in a nice dress, and her hair's dyed, and she looks very smart. This was something that I did actually really appreciate. Another part of this realism that we look for. When you go on nights out, you do want to look your best. But when I first watched it in my early 20s, I thought, where's Lady Hat gone? I was emotionally immature. I promise later entries will have less on it. But I can't help but not like this episode. I appreciate everything they've done, but I don't like it. Oh, that feels so good to finally get out. Number 25, Sir Topham Hatt's holiday. The Hat family go on holiday, even though things start to go wrong for them in a biplane named Tiger Moth. With this episode as well, I just don't think it was needed. It's another episode where Sir Topham Hatt goes on holiday with his wife and his grandkids. We already know that he has downtime. We have seen it in previous seasons. We actually see it in another episode in this season. It just felt like a nothing episode. It once again shows that Lady Hat is a pompous because she slates Anna and Clarabelle, calling them beach huts. But at the end, when they're all done up and look nice, she's like, oh, those are fancy coaches, much better than those beach huts. I know that was an in-joke to make it realise how stupid she actually was, but again, that's another reason why I don't like it. You'd have all the people saying it's sexist jumping on these little points. We do get introduced to Tiger Moth in this, for all that it's worth. I love the different set locations, such as the airfield and the canal, but the story's bland. I didn't enjoy it. It again focuses on human characters where I don't want to see human characters. It's an episode where if I was doing the ironing, I'd be more focused on the ironing than watching this episode. Number 24, a surprise for Percy. Percy moans about his work in the coal mines and wants something exciting to happen. His wish comes unexpectedly true when a line of trucks breaks away from him on a hill, so he and Bertie must stop them. Quite ironic how he's moaning about his work in the coal mines looking for something exciting to happen, yet in another entry in this list, he had the biggest excitement with coal trucks and a mine. So you would think that he would love having this slower change of pace considering what happened to him earlier in the season. He infamously says in this episode, I'm bored, bored, bored. So am I. Even the runaway truck sequence wasn't that exciting, at least for me. Once again, I appreciate it, but considering the high standards that they were setting themselves with Season 5, a lot of them were a downgrade, like in this one. The chase was okay, but when you look at Busy Going Backwards, for example, it's got nothing on that. But then again, nothing would, because Busy Going Backwards is a banger, which we will get to later. It was nice seeing a Bertie and Percy interaction, because we don't see that very often. But overall, just boring and didn't enjoy it. Number 23, Happy Ever After. Mrs. Kindly asked Percy and his driver to make a good luck package for her daughter's wedding, which he succeeds in doing so. Remember Mrs. Kindly, that woman from the first season that we never saw again? Well, now she's back, and she has a daughter who's getting married for plot convenience. I do appreciate that we are fleshing out Mrs. Kindly's family, because we never heard anything about her family, but the whole point was, it's been 4 seasons, and they all of a sudden bring Mrs. Kindly back into the fold and give her a bit more of an expanded arc. Why now? I like that it's a Percy-centric episode. I like that he gets a wee kiss off the bride, but technically would that count as cheating because she's already married? And I'm curious about that bridal package, because it's not practical for family life. Do you think off-air, Mrs. Kindly's daughter went, oh, I really appreciate that, but take it back? Quite an interesting one. But I do like how we get to see Terence the Tractor in it. Number 22, Thomas and the Rumours. The Ninjas discover that Harold has been hired to show a special visitor around the island and fear being replaced, until the Fat Controller told Thomas that he should not listen to rumours. You're honestly better just reading that synopsis and not bothering about the episode that much. I get the point is, don't listen to rumours, and it did get us that amazing meme of the Fat Controller laughed, you are wrong. Gordon's crash was good, and it was certainly an inventive way to get the resolution of the story, but I just wasn't a big fan of this story. It's better than the other ones on the list so far, but it was just very meh. Number 21, Duncan gets spooked. Duncan teases Peter Sam after some trucks fall into a ravine, but when he crosses the old iron bridge, he gets a very spooky surprise. And this is probably going to be one of the reasons why the comments will need to be disabled. I love the atmosphere, I love the music, I love the direction, I love the nighttime setting, I love the fact that it's narrow gauge centric. I love that we mainly get to see the original narrow gauge engines, but when you see the transition between the original season 4 props and the new ones, it does take you out of the story. That's why I feel it really kicks into gear after the trucks fall off the bridge, because you don't see the larger scale models as much after that. So you can really zone in on the story and you can enjoy it from then on. I do like the supernatural elements in this. I've become more fond of this story over time. I've mentioned it in my Halloween/spooky themed episodes of Thomas and Friends video, if you want to check that out. It's mainly the start that lets it down. And I know it's not any of the production team's fault. They had the job to do and they did it. It just took me out of the experience. Number 20, Rusty and the Boulder. Rusty is suspicious of a strange boulder lodged in the mountains, which chases him and the other engines until it demolishes the nearby shed, narrowly avoiding Percy in the process. Once again, I am going to get destroyed in the comments for this, but this is me actually bumping up Rusty and the Boulder in the rankings from my previous worst list episodes, because I've come to appreciate the fan love for an inanimate object of a boulder. The whole thing around it is whether this boulder is sentient, whether it has a mind of its own, or some supernatural forces are at play because the boulders tick that they're messing about with nature, doing all of this digging and doing all of this work. So I get it from an environmentalist eco-warrior stance. Do we leave nature alone to do its thing? Because if we push it, will it have disastrous consequences? And after watching all the rushes and all the bloopers, I appreciate this episode even more because of the amount of work that it went into to try and get this boulder to do the damn job that it was deemed to do. That's more where I think is the boulder sentient, because it gave the crew a ridiculously difficult time. Probably worse than the actual narrow gauge engine props. And I have to admire the fact that it's made me think since the last times that I have watched this episode. When I put it in my original top 10 worst list, I didn't like the fact that it was revolving around the boulder. But once again, opinions change. You start to appreciate things more. I dug a bit deeper into this episode, and it gave me a greater knowledge and understanding of it. And unlike Duncan Gets Spooked, the fact that it's in larger scale for the narrow gauge engines was necessary for this. Imagine if one of those little buggers took that direct hit off Boulder. It would have been game over. And I also like the fact that you get to see Butch the breakdown crane with his resin face in this episode, because in the episode where he's first introduced, he doesn't have one. So it does make you a bit curious of how that happened. If it was just a goof, or is there a supernatural element at play? We also get to see Thumper in this episode, who I now realise is a completely useless design because he is not based on anything, and then you never see him again. But I don't get why, after Boulders caused all of this destruction, that they put him back on another hill. Because if there's some bad weather, or a mudslide, or anything like that, Boulder's just going to come loose again and cause havoc. You have Thumper there, pin that boulder down, and annihilate the bugger, so he can never cause trouble again. But I know this is the whole, if we're saying that Boulder is sentient, it's like we're killing an actual character, and kids won't like that. But I'm looking at it from the realism standpoint here, that you guys were trying so hard to have us believe. If that boulder caused that amount of destruction and that amount of damage, destroy it so it doesn't do it again. Number 19. Toby's discovery. Toby takes the Hat family on an expedition, finding a castle and an old mine. The destinations are reopened, but Toby is spooked by Thomas's story about the old warrior. It then turns out that the old warrior is actually a narrow gauge tender engine named Bertram, who wants to meet Toby. Okay, how did Thomas know about this whole old warrior story? They've only just found this site. How does Thomas know so quickly about this old warrior ghost? And it can't have been a coincidence that he just made it up to spook Toby, because they do call Bertram the old warrior because he's really brave. How is Bertram brave? Why is he called the old warrior? We don't know anything about that. And I was a little bit ticked because this character of Bertram was originally meant to be a tank engine, but for budgetary reasons they couldn't get it. So they took Duke's model, repainted it, added a resin face from Smudger, and then you never see Duke's model again. It annoyed me at the time, and it still kind of annoys me now, because that was the last time that we got to see the original Duke model. Instead of bringing Duke back for any episodes after this, he was subbed out for a new character that made one appearance and you never saw him again. But then again, you never saw Sir Handel again after this, but at least he made a comeback in season 10. Duke never came back. And it being Toby that's really scared about all the ghosts and all that stuff didn't feel true to his character at this point. Toby was the one in previous seasons was joining in on stories about ghosts and spooking other engines. It doesn't make sense that he is spooked. It would have actually made more sense if Thomas was in the lead role of this. And Toby was the one telling Thomas about the old warrior ghost. And then Thomas getting freaked out because he had previous and Ghost Train. And it's a rare occasion that I bat for Thomas to have a lead in an episode. But it would have made more sense if it was him that had the lead in this. And it's not like Toby didn't have any other episodes that he was a lead in, because there are 2 more in here. But the visuals are great. I do like the premise of the story. I like that we're finding other parts of the island throughout this season that were essentially untouched and unexplored. It's just little inconsistencies and loopholes that just made me think, hold on a minute. Number 18, Snow. Thomas is cross with the snow, so Rusty tells him about Skarloey's own experience in Avalanche. The episode where 3 characters are buried alive. First we have Percy at the start of the episode, then we have Skarloey in the middle, and then Gordon at the end. Although Gordon is played for more comedic value. But it doesn't escape the fact that they buried 3 engines in snow in this episode. This is the one where they more focus on the larger scale models than the narrow gauge engines. Mainly Skarloey, because they used the original Rusty engine for the scenes with Thomas. Otherwise, they would look so out of proportion. Now, the thing that has always bothered me about this is the whole ice cocoon sequence. I don't know if that is actually possible to do. Like, have this mound of avalanche snowfall on them, and the heat from Skarloey forms this ice cocoon around them. If someone has a grasp of physics or any type of science that can tell me that I am wrong, please do. It also doesn't make sense to me why they stop in the middle of this line to have their cocoa when there is a chance of an avalanche happening. It's incompetence on the driver and fireman's part. I would have had them blasting through to get to a safe space and then have your cocoa. And doesn't it always seem that when these drivers and firemen have cocoa that something bad is bound to happen? Hugh Flying Kipper from season 1. But the winter visuals really sold it. It is only one episode where there is winter visuals. It focuses on the narrow gauge engines. And the episode wasn't bad. It's just these nitpicks that I do have a problem with. Number 17, Gordon and the Gremlin. Gordon has problems with his fire, and the others joke of gremlins. Later, a special visitor arrives, after her dog runs away into Thomas's cab. An episode where it is very disjointed, there isn't much of anything around it, but I think I rank it higher because it just seemed like everybody was having so much fun with this. They all seemed to enjoy it. Angeles himself sounded like he was having a riot doing this, especially the infamous gremlin dog voice. We also get an introduction to Dowager Hat, Sir Topham Hatt's mum, for the very first time, and she's just kind of there. There isn't much to her, but you don't see her that much anyway, so I guess that kind of fits. Overall, not a bad episode. Number 16, Bah. A best dressed station contest is being held across Sodor. However, as Percy is helping decorate Maithwaite Station, a hungry ram is found at the station and the decorations are ruined. It's a good Percy story and a nice slice of life story, but it's a story about a ram in a best dressed station. Not got much going for it, has it? This is one that is based on real events, and I can imagine that it probably was very scary at the time, but one that they will have a good laugh about as they get older. Mind the time a ram absolutely terrorised our station? Oh yeah, and I needed 30 years of therapy after it. Good times. And the ending with the ram eating Sir Topham Hatt's hat was quite funny. Number 15, Make Someone Happy. James sees Mrs. Kindly, who is upset that her sister cannot come and visit. A mystery tour is arranged for her, and James is chosen for the special job. An episode where James is put in his place by Thomas, but not in the cheeky prick way that he was prone to doing, but in the I am now more mature than you, stop being a way. Out of left field, but it worked. Mrs. Kindly's back again. Now we find out she has a sister and that she can't stay, and this causes so much hassle that the controller of a railway essentially stops all plans to make something special for her. I know they have previous with the whole season 1 episodes and the Mrs. Kenley's Christmas story, but would you really go to all that trouble for one person because their sister wasn't going to come for an overnight? I do get the point of the episode is to put others before yourself and you'll feel better as a result. It just feels a bit empty to me, but just so ironic because it's meant to make you feel all warm and cozy. Number 14, Oliver's Find. Oliver is put on mail duty but ends up going down an old branch line, forcing the Fat Controller to search for Oliver and discovering an old abandoned house. They really established the Oliver and Toad's friendship that they hinted upon in season 4. And they do it in 2 episodes here. This is the weaker one, but it's still just as poignant. I really like the use of the aerial shots in this, where you're seeing it from Harold's perspective, looking down on the island to try and find these engines that are small to him. I like the nighttime visuals because, of course, they're always great nighttime visuals in this show. And I do feel it is overshadowed by Busy going backwards because that's the episode that they always talk about. But it's very enjoyable. Again, it expands the world of Sodor as we know it. That's really it. Number 13, a better view for Gordon. Gordon complains about the plainness of a new station and longs for a panoramic view, which he gets, unexpectedly. Very much known for the crash at the end, because the crash at the end is magnificent. It is completely bonkers. But I do find it ironic that Gordon causes this massive crash and he in turn gets rewarded by having a panoramic view in the shape of his face. That makes sense. I think if it didn't have the crash at the end though, this wouldn't be held as fondly, because the story is very stop-start. Ironically, much like Gordon is in this episode. But it does show Gordon at his pompous, arrogant best. Number 12, something in the air. Henry is cross when Thomas delays him and refuses to listen to his warnings about a line eroded by high tides, which ends up with him plunging into the sea. This is an interesting dynamic that we don't see much of. Thomas and Henry. Yes, they are main characters. Yes, they have had interactions. But it adds another layer to them, where we see that Henry still looks down on Thomas. Maybe he hasn't gotten over the fact that Thomas called him fat in season 1, because he seems to be an extra ass to Thomas in this. And of course, Henry gets his comeuppance with the crash into the sea. But unlike his flying kipper crash in season 1, this crash does have more of a comedic effect to it, when his head pops back up out the water and he spits the water out, and there's that kind of but it must be serious enough because his tender is detached from him, so he's put onto a barge, and then has all those kids laughing at him, calling him a whale and a monster, and naturally his feelings are hurt because Henry is now established as the more sensitive of the big three. But we get a nice reconciliation with Thomas and Henry at the end. The nighttime visuals are great, as always. The work that goes into these type of episodes are really on display here. And the story overall is good. Number 11, James and the trouble with trees. James's bragging prevents him from listening to Henry, Percy and Terence's warnings about trees that are too close to the line. This is an infamous James is a ball-bag, gets his comeuppance and learns a lesson in the episode. Shows how far they've come, because normally this would be done in a 3-episode arc. Now they've managed to cram it into 1 episode. It's always good to see Terence the Tractor get a wee bit of spotlight in an episode. It's nice to see the forest again. Seeing James at his pompous self but ramped up to 11 can be grating if not done properly, but thankfully it is done properly in this. And some of the put downs and the wind ups in this episode just show how tense, uptight, and bitchy all the characters are in this season. They really like to rip each other new ones throughout this. It's the most workplace dynamic season that I think there is out of all the seasons, where everyone's just tired, pissed off, and just wants to just take all of their frustrations out on everybody around them. I think that this series should be shown to teenagers before they go into the working world to prepare them for what is to come. Number 10, Haunted Henry. Henry refuses to believe in ghosts until he and his crew encounter a series of spooky events during the night. This episode is exactly what it said in that description. Haunted. Terrifying. One of those ones that it still gives me chills to watch. A lot of people talk about the tracking shots that were used in season 5. The very up close and personal tracking shots, which make it very uncomfortable. Haunted Henry is a prime example of those shots making me uncomfortable. The up close and personal shots of the truck's resin faces in this, creepy as anything, man. The crash of the trucks falling into that ravine was very well done, and I find it very impressive that 2 of the trucks landed on their wheels. We get the introduction of Old Bailey the Fogman, that we never hear from again, and we get more of the arrogant and softer sides of Henry in this episode, with him at first thinking that Edward's warning is a sign that Edward's going crazy, to him thoroughly believing it and being terrified. It's creepy from the first minute, it does not let up, there's a lot of intrigue and a lot of suspense here. Number 9, Thomas, Percy, and Old Slow Coach. Thomas and Percy discover an old coach named Old Slow Coach in the scrapyard and want to save her. And I can understand why. This coach is absolutely beautiful. The scrapyard setting is very creepy in hindsight as well, because they're just casually driving through the scrapyard where tons of their brothers and sisters are just rusted and decayed around them. It is like they're walking through a graveyard, but you can see all of the skeletons decomposing in front of you. That's the imagery that's on display here. But it's done in such a nice casual, I'm just going to do my job. Oh look, there's Timothy. How's Timothy, the dead one? What? This episode does have a mix of everything that we're trying to do in this season. Some slice of life stuff, some intense sequences, and they did a fantastic job. Number 8, double teething troubles. Bill and Ben are worried when they hear that a diesel engine is going to help them work in the clay pits. In the end, it turns out that Derek is a friendly diesel. And that's about all we know about him, because we never see him again, aside from one very, very brief shot in Calling All Engines. I like Derek. I like his design. I like that his fault was calling 2 diesels of that design, and they incorporated it into a story. But this episode is filled with sadness for me on a personal level. It's the last time we see Boko, and it's where everything seems to change for Bill and Ben as well. They go from these China clay pits to all of a sudden working with Mavis in the 6th season. I would love to see some fanfiction as to how this happens, so it could fill in the gaps. But even though it does fill me with sadness watching this, it is a great episode. I think it's quite underrated in the fandom, and I enjoy it. Number 7, Horrid Lorry. 3 horrid lorries arrive on Sodor and start taking over the engine's jobs. Eventually the tables are turned, and the lorries all end in failure. The episode should have been called Horrid Lorries rather than Horrid Lorry, because Horrid Lorry implies there's only one of them, but there's 3 of them. And I love these characters as antagonists. They add to this little road rebel collective of Bulgy and George, and could have had so much potential going forward. Because like it or not, the lorries should be coming back. The times were changing, more road vehicles were getting introduced, and it would have been great to have like a separate arc where you're seeing all of this playing out, where they keep coming back trying to cause trouble and maybe getting a couple of wins over them. I love Angelise's voice work for the Horrid Lorries in the UK version. The story is very strong. The conclusion is done very well. There was just so much potential with them. I really, really wish that more was done. Number 6, By George. George causes a great deal of trouble for Percy, Thomas, Duck and Gordon. After the Fat Controller finds out everything, George eventually gets punished. Like with season 4, I just love George. Anarchistic, road rebel, is fully set on his purpose in life of destroying the rails and making everything into roads. He's a great character. I do like that he does get his comeuppance in this, because he never did in season 4. But it shows that he can not only cause problems with narrow gauge, he causes a lot of problems with standard gauge. I love his character, I love the story, I love the effects, I love the dynamics in the episodes. This is just great. Number 5, Stepney gets lost. The Fat Controller invites Stepney to work with Toby and Mavis at the quarry. Stepney gets lost on the way home, eventually arriving at the smelter's yard with 2 diesels until the Fat Controller found him. And those 2 diesels become Ari and Bert, mainstays in the show going forward as antagonists. But they're more watered down than what they were in this episode. Ari and Bert just become essentially devious diesel clones. More little bullies to cause annoyances and nuisances to the engines going forward. But in this episode, they were the epitome of death. They worked at the smelters, where they enjoy melting down engines for fun. And considering this was Stepney's last episode in a prominent role, I was worried that they were going to kill him off. The way the atmosphere changed the second that he arrived at that smelter's yard. The fact that the music just went silent and all you heard was the workings of the smelters as he's being pushed towards his doom. It was terrifying, because you're going from the nice happy episode where he goes to work with Toby and Mavis and everything's going well and it's all going fine, and then the second night time comes, he has to make his way home. You just think that something bad is going to go down, something bad did go down, fantastic. Visuals great, voice work great. I would just end up repeating myself constantly because the word fantastic will just come up in every single sentence. Number 4, put upon Percy. Percy complains that he is overworked. While working at the coal mine, some runaway trucks escape and crash inside the mine shaft, which causes the mine to collapse. Holy crap. I could probably end my thoughts on this episode just at those 2 words. It's an episode that does not let up. And I find that with this series, that when the episodes go hard, they do not stop. It does make me understand why the other episodes that are more slice of life and calm need to be slice of life and calm. As much as I may have ripped on them, they're there to give the audience that chance to breathe. Because these episodes send your heart racing. The episode is very dramatic, got an amazing climax. Essentially from the second that he turns up at that mine, you know something is going to go down. I think a lot of the episodes that are in the top 10 for me in rankings were the ones that they would have wanted to present to investors for the movie. Ones where they could say, this is what we are capable of. Imagine what we could do if you gave us a movie studio budget. Because they swung for the fences and they did not miss. Which leads me into number 3, Toby and the Flood. Toby is sent to inspect a dam and discovers a few leaks in it. It eventually collapses and causes an unsafe bridge to break, causing him to drift towards a waterfall, and it is up to Harold to save him from falling down it. They built an entire dam set to essentially cause it to collapse for a massive flood sequence where you genuinely think at one point that Toby is going to go over it. In your heart, you know it's not going to happen, but there is that 1% of doubt that does creep in when you watch it for the first time, thinking they are going to genuinely kill off Toby, or if not kill him off, have him very, very badly done in. It's an episode that is great with setting, tone, and atmosphere, because when this episode starts and you hear the first sounds of the thunder and the lightning, if you aren't paying attention to the episode, you do at that point because you jump. And you realise this is going to be a serious one. The entire mood is dark, it's somber, it's dangerous, it's scary. All of those words that you could use to sum up this episode are in there. And it's a very good trio of characters that are used in this episode. Toby, Percy and Harold. Because there's connection with the 3 of them established from previous seasons. Percy is very emotionally attached to Toby. He is essentially his family. Harold is attached to Percy in the kind of frenemy rivalry. Yes, they have a rivalry, but he would not want to see Percy hurt, and something happening to Toby would devastate Percy. So Harold instantly steps up to the plate. For the type of episode that it is, and what they wanted to achieve, they picked the right characters, the right time, the right situations, and the right conclusion. Number 2, busy going backwards. Toad is feeling bored about going backwards all the time and confesses to Oliver that he wishes to go forwards for a change. On Gordon's Hill, the coupling snaps and Toad goes on a wild ride with the trucks through the main line. If you watch my top 10 best episodes from season 5, you will know that this has actually been knocked off the number 1 spot since I recorded that. Now, I still believe this is a brilliant episode. I believe this runaway sequence will never be topped. I believe that the music from Mike O'Donnell and Junior Campbell is a masterclass in this episode. It's what makes the episode so good for me. It draws you in right from the start because at first it's very playful as you realise, oh, Toad's dream has come true. He's flying down the line. Well, hey. And then when the music changes, that's when you click, oh crap, he's actually out of control. There are serious consequences at stake here. An entire game of cat and mouse between Toad's runaway train and Oliver trying to catch him. Although it doesn't seem to do it very well. I have seen engines like Duck go much faster than Oliver is when he's trying to catch him. He felt very much like he was just sauntering along going, he'll crash at some point, I'll get him. And there's a uniqueness to this episode where the main character, it's a brake van. We're seeing it from their point of view. First Toad's point of view, because he knows that he's unfulfilled in life and wants more. And the trucks are understandably pissed because they actually have their feelings hurt. They appreciate Toad for what he is as a brake van, and they feel like he doesn't appreciate them. With the Troublesome Trucks being complete anarchists,
What's the best way that they can solve this? By causing immense destruction. I mean, the little scenes with Oliver and Toad at the start and at the end are very good. They're very sweet. It establishes that dynamic duo that they have. But it was knocked off the top spot for a reason. And it's been knocked off the top spot by the #1 episode of Thomas and Friends, Season 5, Cranky Bugs. A new crane named Cranky arrives at the docks and causes trouble for Thomas and Percy, but he eventually needs help after a storm. I think a lot of people are hesitant to put Cranky Bugs as #1 on their list because it was the first episode that dropped from Season 5. I think I had a little bit of bias towards that myself. But the more that I watch Season 5, the harder it is for me to deny that they came out the blocks swinging with this episode, because it has so much going for it. Not only does it have the visuals that they look for in a Season 5 episode, the intensity, the bombastic nature, the crash sequence, and everything else that you want, we also get the introduction of Cranky. Cranky becomes a mainstay in the show throughout the rest of its run, through good eras, through bad eras, and even into the reboot. Cranky is still there. He was their first original character, and I don't think it's surprising that this first character manages to stand the test of time. It's a true tribute to Allcroft and Mitten's legacy, that the first character they create when they're flying on their own completely, no Audrey reference material to go by, that it's an absolute runaway success from a character that can't actually run away. In terms of the significance of the franchise, in terms of the overall greatness of the episode, the monumental impact of the character of Cranky, and the interactions that he has with a plethora of engines that come after this, he helped shape the show to what it eventually became. It's a brilliant episode with real weight behind it and real significance to this franchise. And that is my ranking of Thomas and Friends Season 5. Let me know in the comments what you think of Thomas and Friends Season 5. Thank you all for watching, and until next time, keep on jugging.